Seems that the oil market crash has faded somewhat. Let's say, well, it seems that the worst is over. The oil market stabilized around $40 Brent and WTI in the past few weeks. It feels like a slight phony recovery at the moment. I don't think anybody really has a great deal of faith that this is where the oil price belongs, given the still substantial hits to demand. The fact that demand may never recover to the level it was before the crisis. The fact that oil production is increasing already, and so on. So that's a big theme. What happens to the oil market is the seminal theme for all of energy, really. The next one, sticking with oil for a sec, is just the bankruptcy story in the US, and that whether that gives way to another recovery story. Every other price crash in the oil market has been followed by a boom of some kind. Has the cycle broken? Doubtful. So it's a question of timing. When does the story shift from being about these shale companies going bankrupt, unable to get investors interested in more oil production, to a story where it's all about the recovery from shale producers, investors scrambling to get back into the sector that's growing again? We're watching out for that shift. It's a ways off, I would say. For now, the story is still pretty bleak out there in the oil world, especially for people in the oilfield services sector, which is another kind of sub-topic that's worth paying attention to. What happens there? This absolutely crucial sub-segment of the oil industry, the people who provide the services, been hit really hard by this downturn. Thousands and thousands of jobs have been lost. What happens to that sector? Will it have the capacity in future to be part of an oil recovery? So that's oil. Then let's look at the transcendent story, which is in the back of everything, and that's the transition. It's the dream story for anybody who covers energy. It's going to last a long time. It is inexorable. It is happening before our eyes. It involves everything from the big banks to what's happening on the ground, on people's rooftops. It encompasses the whole gamut of the energy sector. At the moment, the big themes there, I would say, are all about how this gets funded, what the policy drivers are for it. Does Joe Biden win the election and lead America down an energy transition path with huge capital investment led by the federal government? Or does Donald Trump win and try to forestall those kind of developments and try and keep the transition at bay? That's a huge part of it as well. But even without the policy, even without the politics in all of this, it's true to say that capital markets have pretty much decided that a transition is inevitable. They've started to price in carbon, quite a high price for carbon as it happens. And because of that, they're starting to look at what they invest in, decide that they don't want to invest in fossil fuels. They do want to invest in higher return renewables. And the question there is whether capital markets, investors, and so on are getting ahead of consumers. If the capital markets, if the investors, if the banks aren't willing to back oil projects, fossil fuel projects that they have in the past, consumers at some stage have to be moving at the same speed as those investors, or there aren't going to be enough projects in future for them to rely on when they come to consume more oil in future and as demand for oil continues to rise. So those two things have to happen at the same speed. In other words, the speed of the transition on the consumer side has to be just as quick as the speed of the transition on the investment side. And it's not clear that that's happening right now. So there could be a big supply side crunch coming at some point, not least in the oil market. If there isn't enough investment in oil markets and there isn't enough investment in exploration and production, then at some stage, unless something is done to control demand growth, which has, even after crashes, always risen over time, then there's going to be some kind of supply crunch. And how the world deals with that, how consumers deal with that, how the market deals with that is going to be a big theme in the next few years as well. The energy business, I think, is probably the one that is, it's always felt that its reputation has been a bit unfair, and that it's seen as somewhat backward and somewhat lacking in the advances that are seen elsewhere, even while it's drilling, wells 6,000 meters beneath the surface. But these days, it really, really is starting to come into its own as a destination and a consumer of some of the most advanced technology. You just have to go into a data room where they're looking at seismic, 4D seismic, displays of how oil reservoirs have been migrating underneath the surface of the earth to understand that. Technology is probably the thing that is doing most to change the energy sector at the moment.